Howdy, howdy, and welcome back to Gale FFTCG. I'm Serah, your host, and today we'll be looking at Earthwater Archfiends. Earthwater Archfiends is a list that is near and dear to my heart. It is by no means a definitive list for Archfiends. I just want to put that out there right away. This isn't by no means maybe even the best list, but I think the shell of the deck is so mutable, as it were, that there could be we could do anything, to be honest, and there are probably so many different ways of building this deck. This is just the one that I have found appealed to me the most. It's, again, no means a definitive deck. That being said, I'm super excited to share it with you, but before we do, don't forget to comment, share, and like. Let me know if there are any deck ideas you would like me to touch on, or anything you would like to see from the channel. And also, if you want to support me, you can scan the coffee QR code or follow the link in the description. And without further ado, let's jump straight into the stats. We've got 22 forwards, 15 backups, and 13 summons. Our playstyle is control, our weakest matchup is aggro, and the elements are earth, water, fire, wind, and fire. I think that's a band or something. Basically, our game plan is to play almost exclusively on our opponent's turn and generate advantage, like, in response to what our opponents do. So we'll get into that a little bit. Our backups, we're running mostly the Royals package, but we do have some other searches, a lot of EX bursts in there that get us a lot of cards, which is great. We're on 13 summons. A lot of them are for protection. There's some recursion in there, and there is also some activation in there, and we'll get onto that a bit. We are on 22 forwards. We're mostly making use of the Category 4 package, but the main reason that this deck is exciting to me is Limit Break Golbez. Normally I would reserve this for the end, but because the deck revolves so much around this Golbez, I thought I would include it in the initial stats video. So Golbez is a 5 CP Dark Forward. Limit Break 2, you can pay 1 and X to search for your 1-job Archfiend of cost X and play it onto the field. You can only use this ability once per turn. Okay, cool, we know that. This is awesome. But once per turn also means on your opponent's turn. So there is a lot of potential that this deck can just throw cards out on your opponent's turn, Archfiend specifically, to destroy your opponent's board, to protect Golbez. Being able to pull forwards out of deck is insane. Very strong. We'll cover that more, but as soon as I saw this card, I was like, I have to build something with this. So the natural evolution of the deck was then like, okay, what's the best backup engines for this? I tried a 4-color shell. I was not sold on it. It was too oddly specific. Like, you had to hit specific things, and we don't need specific things in this list to pay for CP. We are running Tyro, but we don't need Tyro to make this list function. But then I noticed there's a lot of earth and water cards in the Category 4 category, and a lot of them are quite hard to deal with, or are so low value that your opponent doesn't really want to kill them. And then I thought, I wonder if Sophie would like this kind of deck. Turns out Sophie really does like this kind of deck. There's a lot of advantage that you can gain by running earth and water together. Again, this is by no means a definitive list for Golbez. I will definitely be trying multiple iterations of this deck, multiple iterations in other shells. But yeah, I think this deck is super cool and interesting. And before I gush too much more about it, let's jump into the elements that make up the deck. Our engines, I've already talked about the Archfiends at length, but we've got Scarmiglione. That's a bit of protection. It's got back attack, and when it enters the field, you choose a forward, any forward, and reduce the next damage dealt to it by 2k. If that's Golbez, it also gains, this forward can't be chosen by summons or abilities until end of turn. Very strong. We do need to keep Golbez alive, and activating Golbez's ability, even if we don't have Scarmiglione in hand, and playing Scarmiglione into the field is very strong. We've got one copy of Rubicante that when it's put in the break zone, it chooses a forward opponent controls and deals it damage equal to Rubicante's power. At damage 3, it gains plus 3k as well, so it can be an 8k or a 5k. We've got Cagnazo that when it enters the field, we can bounce it forward, or if we control Golbez, instead we put that forward into the break zone. Barbaricia, when it enters the field, we can recur an Archfiend other than Barbaricia, and it's an EX burst too, which is kind of cool. And when Barbaricia enters the field, if we control a Golbez, we deal 3k damage to all the forwards opponent controls. And we also have Rubicante. EX burst deals 8k to something, but it is worth knowing, because people have not been reading this card correctly. It's not when Rubicante enters, it's when Golbez attacks. So this is a repeatable removal piece. Rubicante also has a fire and one neutral CP to name an element if during this turn, if Rubicante is dealt damage by abilities of the named element, the damage becomes 0 instead, so that's a really good way of protecting your Rubicante as well. It's a pretty hard card to remove, actually, so big fan of all of these. Rubicante and Barbaricia were kind of the ones that I wasn't the biggest fans of. In terms of what they did, there were alternate versions. There's the 2 CP Barbaricia, but I found that the setup was a little too much to gain an instant speed board wipe. Super cool in theory, not that great in practice. We're on the royalty backup engine. Basically, in my mind now, you need to run multiple backups that search you other backups. So if you have Claris, you can go get Kolka. If you have Serah, you can get Lena or Kolka. Ideally, your best opener would be a Serah into a Kolka, so you have Earth and Water CP straight away. For Rydia, basically, when Rydia is really hard to remove, when a Category 4 character enters, don't worry, there's lots of those. She gains 2 growth counters, or when she enters as well. And then you can free cast summons once per turn on your opponent's turn or your turn, which is very important. You can cast a summon of cost equal to or less than for the number of counters for free, which is super strong. Obviously, the free casts, you could easily get to 6, 8, 10 counters here. I just assumed that you were running on the bare minimum, but if you want to try out a list that really goes ham on making Rydia cast like the biggest, baddest summons, go for it. Have fun with that. For our combos, the main one is Rydia and Asura. Asura is just a jack of all trades. It can activate forwards, it can activate backups, or it can get characters of cost 2, of which there are plenty. The coolest thing is that we can, even if our opponent, even if we have Golbez and no backups up, if we have Rydia on the field, our opponent has to respect that any card in hand could be an Asura, giving us the option to activate our backups and then cheat in something on our opponent's turn with Golbez. Super potent, basically it like plays mind games with our opponents, where our opponent has to work harder than we do to win the game, basically because they're also doing mental gymnastics while we're just sitting there potentially just bluffing our opponents out. So it's quite fun. In case of protection, we have quite a few of the common packages. I've already talked about Scarmaglione, but we're on Kukulin to blank abilities, Mist Dragon to defend us from summons, or also make sure that we can't have things broken, or remove all cards in our opponent's break zone from the game and draw a card. Basically, Mist Dragon actually does quite a bit here, and again, our opponents really have to respect that we might have a Mist Dragon for free off of our Rydia. Amaterasu, obviously, here. One that's not so obvious is the 5 CP Earth Cecil, where we can pay Earth and Water instead, and if we do, when Cecil enters the field, Cecil deals us a point of damage. There's a lot of EX bursts, maybe we hit one, maybe we don't. It doesn't matter, because the real reason we're running Cecil is we can crack Cecil, search for a card named Cecil with Job Paladin and play it onto the field, and with that, we can play the 5 CP Cecil. So when Cecil enters the field, you may play one character of cost 4 or less from your and onto the field. When it enters the field, if it's a category 4 character, you can activate 2 backups. Sometimes that's relevant. In fact, sometimes being pretty frequently relevant, which is kind of cool. That's great for our Golbez. It means we can maybe cheat in Scarmiglione if we've activated 2 backups. When one or more characters you control are chosen by your opponent's summons or abilities, if your opponent doesn't pay 2, you get to cancel that effect. This is really cool, especially if we're trying to, maybe our opponent is going to search for something, maybe off of like a, I don't know, Tyvis, and then plays the, and we're scared that they're going to play like some removal piece. It makes the most sense that they would play a removal piece. It's like, okay, cool, I'll crack it, it's fine. I'll go and get Cecil, I'll deploy something, and then I'll also make your stuff harder to hit. I think this is really good. I also think this is really cool because it plays around the light Yuna. Because the light Yuna basically just can like dole things for free or whatever. But still, now they have to suddenly pay with their forwards and with CP, and suddenly that doesn't seem as appealing. And sometimes we don't even care if the cancel gets, if like the effect of Cecil entering gets canceled, as long as like it's not Amaterasu or something. But usually we don't care about it getting canceled because it's still around and its protection is kind of why we're running it. We're only on 1 copy. An argument could be made to go up further, maybe even get rid of the 5 CP Earth Cecil entirely to go up to 3 of this. But I think we don't want to play our off-color ones. We want to play Earth and Water forwards. So I'm not 100% sold on that. For our removal slots, I've already talked about Cagnazzo and the Rubicantes, but Serah Mobius is super cool in this list as well. Earth Water forward, 5k. It's a princess too, which does mean that it can be searched. When it enters, you choose one of the following actions and choose 1 forward opponent controls and 1 forward opponent controls, and they fight each other or draw a card. It's removal, it's draw, not much more to say there. For advantage, we have a lot of it. We're on 2 copies of Leonora to go and get the Porums. We're also on 3 copies of Tyro to search any forward. I've talked about Serah, I've talked about Radia. Kusith is recursion for backups and or forwards. Porum is recursion for our summons. Lena, we can use the special to recur something of cost 2. There's just a lot of good advantage here, but the most important piece is Sophie. 2 CP Earth Water forward. It saw some let's say it saw some of the spotlight before it was swiftly dropped and restricted to 1 way back in the day. But I thought that as I was testing the deck a little bit, I realized that the deck doesn't have a lot of ways of pushing win cons, and control decks typically in other games have won almost exclusively by pushing, by just outvaluing your opponent over time and slowly pushing for game. This deck can do that. Obviously, Golbez being like a 9k is not nothing, but I wondered if there was a way we could potentially either accelerate that or force our opponent into bad spots by dealing with another type of removal. And thus I figured Sophie is probably a good shout in this list. So for each Earth forward or Water forward, or basically they're separate abilities, but they do effectively the same thing. For each Earth forward and each Water forward, Sophie gains plus 2k. If Sophie's power at the end of turn is 10k or more, you draw a card and your opponent takes a point of damage. So obviously this is insanely hard to interact with because there's no end of turn trigger. There's an end of turn trigger and you can't interact with those. There's no way of umming it because it doesn't have an enter the battlefield effect. Obviously it kind of dies to Cloud and things, but we've touched on how Mist Dragon can just keep this alive. If we don't need our Golbez, if we don't want to keep our Golbez alive, that's fine. We can keep our Sophie alive. Our opponent still has to respect that as long as we have Rydia on the board. Serah Mobius counts towards both costs. So this Sophie is actually insanely, insanely powerful in the context of Earth Water. And that's why I kind of called that the list Earth Water, because that's like the primary win con is actually Sophie. We have lots of ways to get it back if it dies, lots of instant speed interaction to make sure that even if our opponent missed dragons or bin, it's fine. We probably have a Kusith or an Asura loaded. And if it doesn't work out, that's fine. We just keep playing our game plan with Golbez. But yeah, for our limit breaks, the most important part of this, I would say, is be very careful with your economy. And obviously, this is by no means perfect. There's still a lot of experimentation. Leonora has the name clash thing, but I think it's fine if you don't see a Leonora backup to play this Leonora. Maybe you need it to get back a category 4 forward from your break zone. That's fine. Also, it can keep our Golbezes alive and all that sort of stuff as well with its tap ability. So that's probably fine to keep in there. And also because it's not any slots in your deck, if you do have it, you just don't play it. Or if you do have a copy of Leonora on the field already, you just don't play this one. That's fine. Lunafreya, because we have a lot of EX bursts. Tidus, because our forwards are sticky, and maybe we can pull that off. We don't need to if we don't have to. Golbez is definitely the most important. If you're building this list, always have 2 Golbez. One as a backup in case they manage to remove your other one early. 1 copy of Cloud because we can play it off of Tyro, and 2 copies of Leo. Pretty simple stuff. Just because of the sheer metric weight of the limit break costs in most of these cards, you're likely only playing 1 or 2, which is a given for most, but just know your matchups. That's going to definitely be a definer of how this deck plays and what good you do with it, is knowing your matchups, knowing what cards are going to win you those matchups, and knowing especially how well your limit break zone might work out. But yeah, that's the deck tech. If you like this video, please comment, share, and like. Mr. Algorithm absolutely adores when you do that, and it definitely boosts a little bit of my self-esteem. If you want to support me, scan the coffee QR code or follow the link in the description. Have a great day and a great rest of your week.